Huh. All right, I lost the connection there. I think we're good now. The Wi-Fi is good on my computer. We're just gonna wait a second for people to roll in and we're gonna get started. Sorry about that, lost the connection. Let's see what happens. We're gonna get started in 2 minutes. Sorry, Kelsey. Hello, Hey Solasi. We're about to get started in 1 second. Kelsey, you're being awesome. Thank you for waiting. I tried to redo the Wi-Fi here for a second and I know it was gonna kick me off. Hello, Bella the Bean. All right, people should be getting a notification about now. Blue is still, yep, he's done. He's not gonna wake up for any tricks. All right, I am going to get started. I'm gonna go down a list of stuff I want to talk about. I made a list because I figured if I put this list up on the description and YouTube, then you guys can just kind of scroll down through the list and find your way throughout the video. So here we go. For any people that don't understand a lot of the ecollar stuff, just if you have more questions after I speak, feel free to ask them all at the end. Hello, Frenchies. Ecollar work well with very fluffy dogs. It does work well with fluffy dogs. You just have to find the right prongs. There's a lot of stuff you have to go around with that. I'm gonna try to bring that up in a minute when I talk about placement. If you still have questions about it, ask me at the end and I'll be more than happy to answer. All right. So I'm gonna get started. Cool. Here we go. So why do I love e-collars? Why do I push them so much on people, and why am I always talking about them? I am a huge fan of having dogs off leash. I'm a huge fan of taking dogs to parks, human parks, dog parks if there isn't too many people or dogs, and specifically hiking. I love hiking, I love bike riding, I love moving with the dog and having them off leash, right? It's one of my favorite things to do. For me, it's very important that whenever I teach anything about an e-collar, that it has to all be taught first without an e-collar. Everything has to be taught first without it, right? I like to compare it to a cell phone. What I mean by that is you can't just give a child a cell phone, right? A smartphone. It wouldn't make sense. You need to teach your child to speak first. Once your child can learn to speak, then if they go over to grandma's house or somebody else's house that they know, you can call them and you can say, hey, it's me, right? Mom, dad, whatever. Same thing with a dog. I want the dog to understand what my voice, and most importantly, pressure. We're gonna talk about leash pressure in a little bit. I want them to understand that before I use a wireless device to communicate with them. So we'll talk about corrections and punishments in a little bit, but it's really important. Again, I know I'm kind of repeating myself. Really important that everything is understood first without an e-collar, right? Especially the way that I like to train dogs. I get hired a lot to stop behaviors, but at the end of the day, I start really pushing to people, hey, in the end, your relationship with your dog is only going to get better if you learn what makes your dog work, what makes your dog love life, what makes your dog love you, and what makes your dog feel safe, right? So most importantly, and I know this is a silly term to use because humans use this a lot, what is your dog's love language, right? When we learn what your dog's love language is, adding an e-collar, adding any of that stuff it's really not a problem at all. It's super easy to do. So, all right. So the minimum reason why I teach e-collar to people, this is the minimum. So if somebody said to me, hey, do I really need an e-collar? I don't have problems with my dog. And I try to explain to people, hey, an e-collar can do what a shock collar does. It can go up in a level and be uncomfortable to your dog, be a punishment, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It can be a punishment, but it's a lot more than that, right? On low levels, you can speak to your dog on a low level. As you turn it up and it gets uncomfortable, then it becomes really the job of what a shock collar does and used to do, even a bark collar, right? So the minimum reason why I tell people that it's great to have an e-collar is because you can teach, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. I have my notes right over there. You can teach engagement and you can teach recall. To me, those are probably the two most important things. So if I don't have engagement with a dog, if a dog is not looking at me, aware of me, I don't ask for anything else. Seriously, I don't ask for anything else. If a dog can't look at me, can't focus on me, I call those target commands, right? Touching their nose to my hand or making eye contact with me. I don't want to ask for anything else. I am going to find myself talking too much or correcting too much or moving into punishment too much. So I teach engagement first. So again, people coming in, minimum thing that I teach on the e-collar is engagement and recall. Recall means come back to me. If a dog can't come back to me, I don't have a dog. That's the most important thing for me when it comes to non-command things, right? Like a dog just has to want to be with me, has to come to me. So what I do with an e-collar is I layer it for a dog to love feeling that little sensation on their neck. If you're my client, you know that the first thing I teach you is eye contact, engagement with your dog. And if you want to teach your dog through an e-collar, we layer it together, right? I'm going to keep moving a little bit down the line. So I'm going to talk about something that a lot of people probably are not ready for me to. Didn't come here for this, right? But I want to talk about the definition of my terminology use. I am, English is my second language, so I've used a dictionary my whole life. I like to know what the meaning of words are. You'll see a lot of trainers talk about punishment and talk about corrections. For a lot of people, punishment and corrections are the same thing. For me, they're not. They're actually two very different things. And even my most favorite people, even my mentors, use those both together. Punishment and correction to them mean the same thing. But by definition, punishment for me is when I aim to avoid a dog's past behavior, something that just happened. The dog jumps on somebody. I find the dog eating poop, cat poop. I find the dog barking. A correction for me is when I aim to prevent something from happening in the future. I aim to prevent an unwanted mindset, a behavior, an action, or load-in, I call it. Another way, sorry, I don't know why my cell phone paused it. So another thing I tell people is like you're in school and you didn't write something right on your essay and you get a correction, right? So they say, hey, we're gonna deduct this point because you didn't do it right. You don't get punished, you just get a correction. You get told, hey, you have to do this differently. Punishment is when you start a fight in school, when you don't show up on time and you have to do detention, or you get expelled, something like that, right? It's something you don't want, something you get in trouble for. For me, right, I know a lot of trainers, they use those words interchangeably, and that's fine. But you'll understand in a little bit as I speak about how I use a leash and how I use e-collar, why a punishment and why a correction to me are two different things, right? So I'm gonna just move to another thing and I'll come right back to that all together at once. Somebody asked me to talk about placement when using other collars on a dog. So placement for me on an e-collar should always be on this side of the neck, not here on the trachea, not on the back of the neck. I laugh because on a lot of my videos when I'm playing with my puppy, you'll see he has these really nice long prongs on him because he has long fur, so they move a little bit, and you'll see that when me and him are playing, they move. I always fix it. right? It's a very different stimulation here for him, and even for us. You should try an ecollar. If you're going to use one on your dog, you should try it on yourself. On here, on these parts of your neck, it's on either side of the trachea. You have the muscles that are running this way, and the stimulation is very different than the back, right? Very different. You'll see that dogs actually try to scratch at it differently when it's on the back. They'll actually look back, but when it's here, it's different, and we'll talk a little bit about why that's happening. So for placement, if you're using multiple collars, I love Prong Collar, so I'll explain in another video why I love them so much. You want to put the ecollar below the Prong Collar, so ecollar then Prong. If you're gonna have a flat collar, like your regular flat collar, your jewelry collar, where you put your address for the dog and the telephone, it's below. But it's Prong Collar higher, and then e-collar, right? Hope that answers that question. But again, remember, the e-collar goes on either side of the trachea. So, okay, so leash communication. I know it might seem a little confusing. I'm going to talk for a little longer than you guys probably expect about leash communication when it comes to an e-collar. But let's go back to the first thing I said. I am not going to give a child a cell phone, a smartphone, or a foreigner, right? I can't have a conversation with somebody who speaks in Chinese. I can't have a conversation with them on a cell phone if I haven't talked to them face to face. If we both haven't learned, I either haven't learned Chinese or they haven't learned English or Spanish, my language. So leash communication works like that. I want to teach everything with a leash first before I move away from the leash with a dog. Probably the most important thing. And let's get back into terminology. I use different terms when I use a leash. I use what's called tap taps. When I tap on the leash super gently, I want the dog to engage with me and make eye contact. When I put tension on the leash, tension, and it's soft, it's not hard, the dog has to come to me. That's what I teach. And then when I add pressure to the leash, which again, still not hard, it's a correction. Remember what we said about correction? And don't confuse it. Anybody coming in, it is not punishment. It's two different things for me. A correction, it's negative reinforcement. It means you need to fulfill something to get your way. Normally it's a sit. Sometimes it's a down. And then there's a pop. The pop is it should be uncomfortable. It's a punishment. It's positive punishment. Positive, you're adding something. Punishment, it's uncomfortable to the dog. A lot of what we're going to talk about with leash and a lot of what we're going to talk about with the e-collar is we don't get to choose how those things work. We get to condition them, and then the dog, depending on the dog, right? Some dogs need a lot more pressure, whether some dogs don't mind you turning up the pressure on e-collar or turning up the stimulus on an e-collar. So you don't get to choose that, right? And if you guys have questions about that at the end, I'll explain that. The dog tells you what is what. But we always want to do as minimal as possible. If you know me, I talk very quietly, because that way if I want to raise my voice, I can. Same thing with a leash, same thing with an e-collar. I want to do everything at low levels, so then I always have the room to bring it up according to distractions, right? I'll bring that up in a little bit too. So why do I use leash over and over and over again with everything that I do with a dog? Is because I want a dog to be happy and I want them to be relaxed. I make dogs carry a leash around the house, around their neck on a harness. I want them to be okay with a leash. Then once they start to love that, I bring in the e-collar. We have to remember that an e-collar is a stimulation, right? It's an electric stimulation. It's like a tense unit. It works the same, it's the same size as a tense unit. But we have to remember that, hi little Ellie, hi Tatiana. We have to remember that an e-collar is a foreign sensation to a dog. So we have to be patient. We have to teach them. And again, I teach engagement first with the dog, eye contact. They look at me and I get a lot of rewards. Then the next thing I do is I touch the stem on the e-collar. I press the button and I ask them to look at me. And I do this, and I'm going to speak about low levels in a second. And I do this on the lowest level possible, and I reward. This is the first thing I do with dogs. I love happy dogs. I love dogs that are excited to see me. I love walking around with a lot of dogs that are happy. Might be an egotistical thing, but that's what I want. I don't want sad or super concerned dogs behind me, right? So we are using as little stimulation as possible at first, because we want the dog to just love that, and we want the dog to pay attention to the sensation. And there's a lot of things you could do for this. There's a lot of exercises you can practice around your house. And I do this with a lot of my clients, where sometimes we don't even say the name, we just tap it super gentle, and the second the dog engages and looks, we give them a lot of love, we give them a lot of treats, or whatever it is that they like, toys sometimes. So I hope I answered that. I have everything written down in little parts. But again, leash guidance is a must before going off leash. So you have to combine those things, right? And remember in the beginning I talked about a tap on a leash. Sorry, I did this. On a leash, tension comes to me. Pressure means negative reinforcement, which is, hey, you have to fulfill something. And then a pop is punishment. So when we take that over to the ecollar, it's the same thing. The same exact thing happens. It's not a foreign thing. You're doing little taps. You're bringing up the tension. You're bringing up pressure, and then it becomes a pop, right? So hope that makes sense. I'll explain that a little bit more if anyone has questions. So low-level layering. This is probably the main thing that we really want to concentrate on when we talk about all this. So you want to find the lowest number for the dog. And somebody had asked me, is it the same process for a deaf dog? And yes, it's the same exact process for a deaf dog, no matter what the dog's handicap is. You want to use the same process. So you want to find the lowest level. You put the e-collar on, and you put it at 0, and you bring it up to 1, to 2, to 3. And what you're looking for is a stimulation reaction, a muscular reaction where the dog is actually like looking for a bug or looking for something that touched it. And as soon as you notice that, Pavlov's law, I never say that right, you reward the dog. You say its name, you go, yes, right? It's the same thing as when you whistle or when you clap your hands or you slap your thigh and you call the dog, same thing. The smallest sensation that you can tell that the dog is feeling, you're gonna reward. You wanna reward. Same thing that I do on a tap on a leash. You wanna make them love that thing, right? And yes, little Ellie, I'll explain some more about any of that. We are finding the lowest sensation, and then we're slowly bringing it up. For some people, I worked with people that use shock collars or underground fence, and this takes a little longer because the dog already has only felt those sensations at high levels, uncomfortable levels, which is fine. There's nothing inhumane about that. That's how we keep our dogs safe, which I understand. But it takes a little bit more condition, and it takes a little bit more science, which I love. I actually love doing that. I love reconditioning a dog that has had a bad experience with a shock collar and electric collar, because it's fascinating to see the confidence that the dog will have once you've done it right. And that's really the point. It's like, you'll know when you're doing things right. So I can keep talking about this. I have so much to go down, but I'll go a little bit more. So another point that's actually really worth saying is you want to use a stimulation, the e-collar stimulation, not the vibration. I know the vibration might sound like it's a more humane thing to do. It is not. If you've ever trained dogs, you touch the vibration, and most dogs are actually, they're bothered by it. They're confused. It's like something's moving on their neck, right? And you'll read this throughout the internet. You'll even see trainers and people say, oh no, I only use vibration. The problem with vibration is that you can't turn it up. You only have one setting. So imagine if your dog is hypersensitive, you will press the vibration and your dog's gonna bug out, you can't turn it down. Imagine your dog's very callous and strong and tough, and you press a vibration, it doesn't feel it. So whether you want it to be a negative or, a positive experience or a negative experience, something you don't want, I probably didn't use those terms, right? Science. You can't use the vibration properly, right? You can't dial it up. So just like leash pressure, going back to what I was saying, I use different levels of leash pressure first. A lot of leash pressure, different things. It's the same thing as layering the e-collar. So that's why I use a stim, because a stim you have a whole, the mini educators, which is what I use, the ET300s, you have 100 levels. I can barely feel anything up to a level 9, 10. My dog Blue feels a level 4. Some dogs I've worked with work at a level 2, 3. Some dogs work at a level 8, 9, 10. It depends on the breed. It depends on the personality. It depends a lot on where you are. So I think I explained how I introduce it. I hope that makes sense. Lowest level, tap it, make the dog love it. Just make the dog love it. That's the very first thing that I do with any dog. I want them to just feel that and go, oh my God, this is great for me. This is really fun. I love what I'm feeling. Some of the most common mistakes you see with e-collar training. I'll try to remember your question for the end of this, but I can actually answer this pretty quickly. The most common mistake is everybody wants to turn it up. Everyone thinks that turning up the volume, the intensity on an e-collar, or the volume of their voice, or the pressure on a leash is going to get a dog to behave. That is not how it works. If you have children, if you've ever worked with children, any animal, human or dog or anything, I've worked with birds, they get callous to you bringing up intensity of anything. So the most common mistake that I see, not just with e-collar training, but with any kind of dog training, is everybody wants to use more force, more intensity, more volume, and then the dog, from now on, the dog will require you to bring up the intensity for it to listen to you. So I like working at minimum levels with everything. Minimum levels. And again, some of my mentors that I love, people that I truly respect, don't work like that, and I understand, but that's how I like to work, especially because I live in an urban community. I like to spend a lot of time in super busy places where I can have a different range of volume and e-collar level and leash pressure. So what about your Huskies? What does that have really thick coat? Oh, I use different, I don't know if I have my Prong Collar here. Maybe in the car. E-collar. No, I don't have it here. I use a 1 inch, the 1 inch prongs on it. It goes right through. It's smooth. It doesn't have any sharp edges. That's what I used on him. Or you can use the butterfly. So what did somebody ask? Somebody asked me tap versus continuous. I'll talk about that in a second. But I also just want to remind you guys this. So some people say, do I use the tap to get the dog's attention, or do I hold it down until it fulfills what I'm asking? That actually all depends on how you're training it with a leash, right? Do you use verbal cues at the same time in the e-collar stimulation? Yes, I definitely do that. I want to use verbal cues with the e-collar stimulation. So then later, the dog learns that when I talk, the e-collar stimulation might be coming, or vice versa. When I use an e-collar stimulation, I might use vocals. They're waiting for one or the other, right? Tap versus continuous. This is really something worth talking about. So remember, guys, tap for me is engagement. Tension means come to me. Pressure is a correction. So in reality, a tap, which is when I tap on a leash, I want the dog to be excited and look at me. When I pop on a leash, it's a punishment. It means you're on the wrong track. So really, those are both taps on an e-collar, right? They're just short. But tension on a leash is something you hold on to until the dog commits to you. Pressure to me means that you're asking the dog to do something, and you're adding pressure until the dog fulfills it. So with that said, do I use tap versus continuous? it really just reflects on the leash pressure that you've taught the dog. It reflects where you're at with your dog. Something I haven't mentioned enough in this is e-collar training is a very fluid experience. You don't get to choose where you're at with your dog. Even day-to-day things change, right? Some people say to me, oh, I took my dog out in the front of the house and we were at a level 4-5. And then the next day my dog's being disobedient, which is a whole nother conversation. I'm gonna write a whole book about disobedience. And the dog now doesn't pay attention to me outside. Well, you don't know what's out there. And what I mean by that is they'll turn the e-collar up, right? And you don't know. You don't know if a cat just pooped in the bushes. You don't know if it smells like a burrito in the air. You don't know if dogs just came out and marked around the property. So all of this with an e-collar is a very fluid experience. And to segue into this, which is probably my most important thing I want to talk about with e-collars, is the numbers. So many people get stuck on the numbers. Everybody, they're using the e-collar, they're holding the e-collar in their hand, and they're looking at it. Don't look at the e-collar. Look at the dog. Stop looking at the e-collar. Maybe once in a while, if you want to come back to the lowest number, sure. But people have to understand you need to stop looking at the e-collar. The e-collar numbers don't matter. What matters is the dog. And depending on the level of the e-collar, it could be a tap-tap, which means engage with me, look at me, come to me. You can bring it up and your dog's gonna act like you are adding tension, which means come back from afar. It can be, you can bring it up a little more and it means it's pressure, it means you need to fulfill this. Or you can turn it up a lot. Usually they have a boost button for that, right? A boost button is something that adds a lot of numbers. And that means, hey, I do not like you doing that. That's something I don't ever want you doing that again, right? Whether it's chasing another dog, chasing a cat, chasing any animal. Sorry, Ed, what do you mean, what about a husky? Type out the rest of the question if you don't mind. So when it comes to numbers, you do not worry about the numbers. And I've proven this time after time to my clients. The people who really want to move too fast sometimes ignore what I'm saying, they start ranking it up, and that's not fun either. But the people who really are scared about hurting their pets with their dogs with an e-collar, they don't go up. And then they don't understand, then they take it personal. They think, oh, my dog doesn't pay attention to me. If I bring up the e-collar, I'm punishing it. Well, no, it doesn't actually, it's not punishment if the dog is purposely ignoring you, right? Like, let me give you an example. What would be a good example? Me talking. If you were here in my house right now and I was talking to you, I'd be talking to you in this volume, right? We're talking. Then we go outside right now as we speak. There's a helicopter flying outside. If we go outside, I'm going to start speaking louder. I'm not mad at that person. That's not punishment. That's just the number, the level, the volume it takes for me to communicate to them. If we go walking across the street a few more blocks, I don't know why there's a bar open that plays music right now during COVID. And we went in there, I would have to talk super loud for whoever's with me. And I would have to talk in very few words because at a bar, it's very distracting. So the level that you bring up, it has nothing to do with how you feel about the dog. It has to do with what distraction is there with your dog. With Blue, I'm going to keep everything transparent. My puppy, my 10-month-old puppy, he works great at a level 4, 5, 6 in the backyard. Great. He loves it. He gets super excited. When we go outside, we go to a place called Mount Laguna and we go out hiking and it's just me and him. He sees a chipmunk. He sees a deer. He's not going to at all look back at me until I tap him with a 40, 45. And people go, oh my God, that's horrible. No, it's not. If you look at him, he goes, he's just feeling, he's not feeling it because of the distraction, cortisone, adrenaline, dopamine is hitting him. And he's going after the chipmunk, he's going after the deer. And all of a sudden he feels it. He didn't feel the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, blah, 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 blah. He feels the 40 and he goes, whoa, I think my dad's calling me. See you later, deer. See you later, chipmunk. I'm going back to my dad. As he comes back, If he's coming back and he smells something else, let's say he smells dog pee, and now I'm still at a 40 and I tap it, he's going to be uncomfortable. So I always bring it back down as they come up. I always bring it back down, and I bring it up according to how the dog responds to me turning it up. Hope that makes sense. Huskies can't feel neither collar or the shock collar. What will you provide? He doesn't feel his shock collar. I'm not sure if I understand your question, but I'm imagining that your dog doesn't feel the stimulation. You need a different contact point, and most importantly, this is something I should have said in the beginning. Collars have to be super tight. Actually, when you put them on, most people say, "Oh, isn't this too tight?" It's not. It's not. You should only be able to fit 2 fingers underneath the collar, and if you find yourself turning it up because you think your dog is ignoring you, it's not. It's not ignoring you. Again, you want to be in a very low distraction area when you're doing that. You want to make sure that you're doing it in a place with no distractions, no grass, no dogs around, no cats around, no birds around. So I hope that makes sense. I am going to answer some questions. I've been talking for a half hour already. Is there a specific age you should introduce it? You should introduce the e-collar. Is there a specific age? There's not necessarily a specific age. There's just a specific time. So if you start training a puppy at 4 months to love coming to you, to love listening to you, and you're training it with a leash at 5.5, 6 months, putting an e-collar, especially you'll see a lot of dog trainers do this, it's fine. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to start punishing and correcting a dog, especially that young. At that point, you really want to be managing your puppy. So sometimes the younger the dog is, the more we're making the e-collar an amazing association. We're making it a working tool. We ignite the dog with it, right? Hope that makes sense. E-collars and reactivity. Somebody wrote e-collars and reactivity with a question mark. I'm not sure exactly what that was, but really what I want to say, going back to what I said a minute ago, is, I think somebody else asked another question like that. So let me answer another question and then go back to that. Hopefully I can answer all of them. So I'm interested in understanding how impulse control, prey drive, plays into e-collar training. Do you use the collar as a correction at times? Do you teach impulse control at the same time before, or is it all part of the process? Do you teach impulse control at the same time? I do not teach impulse control at the same time, because impulse control normally is a lack of engagement and bringing up the distraction accordingly. I want to teach impulse control at a very, very, I want to control everything when I'm teaching impulse control. I do this with a lot of puppies. A lot of people ask me, how do you teach a no to a dog? How do you teach positive punishment to a dog? I don't take a dog out into the world and put them in front of a skunk or a cat and punish them, right? I don't pop it. What I do, hey Toby, I do it in a place where I can control things. I want to role play it. I want to model things that I can control. I want to do it with a leash. I want to teach impulse control at a very, very low distraction place. And most importantly, I want to have communication with the animal. So when you're teaching impulse control and you correct or punish the dog, ideally the dog would go into a default behavior that you've taught it. That way, the dog doesn't have to figure out. I do not like having dogs make choices in hard, distracting places. I like to snap a dog out of their situation and the dog goes, oh yeah, you like me sitting down and looking at you. Sorry, I got distracted by that thing. So do I use the e-collars as correction? Absolutely, but first it has to be taught through a leash. It has to be taught through vocal, through words. I have this all broken down in my website, thehumandogteam.com, if you go to the canine portal. I'm interested in understanding how impulse control and prey drive plays into e-collar. So, and this is all part of the same question. Impulse control and prey drive are two different things, right? Prey drive, a lot of the time, I like using prey drive to train a dog. So If I want to control impulse control, I actually will use a toy and get their prey drive going. And this is something that I could talk about forever. I love talking about play and prey drive. I do a lot of my training like that with my clients' dogs that are getting trained to a higher level. This is something that's probably my favorite thing. We use prey drive to bring the dog up and down. So you ignite, hey Sophie, you bring up the dog's level of excitement, arousal, loading, and then you bring it down. You're using this up and down, up and down. You want to first do this with a leash on. You want to do this verbally. Then you bring on the e-collar, right? Hope that makes sense. And I hope that answers the question about e-collars and reactivity. To me, all those things are lack of self-control, impulse control. Let me see what's going on here. There's a few other questions. When to use e-collar to interrupt hyperfocus before reacting? Boost versus conditioning. So this all depends. Depends on what the dog is actually focusing on. So if I want to use an e-collar to interrupt hyperfocusing, usually you want to find the threshold. Usually what I want with a dog, this is the long-term goal. I want my clients' dogs, if they see another dog and they're hyper-focusing, I want to teach them ahead of time through distance and thresholds, hey, whenever you see something you want, you got to look at me. And I'll figure it out if I can get it to you or not. Right? That's the number one thing I want to teach. Once I teach that, then I have no problem correcting or punishing a dog and snapping them out of something and having them look back at me. But the situation is, most people, dog trainers can do this. I know a lot of dog trainers that go straight to punishment, and I get it. It works for them. It works for their client. I like teaching people to build a relationship with their dog. I like teaching people to slowly bring up the distraction, just like you would with a child, just like you would if you were playing an instrument, right? Even if you were good at singing, you wouldn't just go and sing in front of 80,000 people. You start with small places, small venues. So same thing with interrupt and hyperfocus behaviors. You want to be able to control them. You want to be able to lead them away. So if you're going to use an e-collar right away, normally if the dog's hyperfocused, you're going to be going up on the e-collar. The dog won't feel anything. And then finally the dog will feel it at a really high number, and they will be very uncomfortable. Now, are you conditioning the dog that thing they're hyper-focusing on is bad if they feel it? Sometimes. Depends on the dog. But I don't use it like that. You know, I really love teaching the dog that as you feel that thing going up, you got to come back to me, you got to check in, you got to sit. And that's a whole nother conversation, right? We can talk one day about punishing unwanted behaviors. There's two more questions. How to use e-collar when a dog walking. Okay. How to use e-collar when dog walking to heel or encourage follower mindset. How I do that is I first teach a heel really, really, really well with a leash and a lot of treats or toys. And I actually, if I can move to toys, it's ideal, right? Ideal to do a heel on a leash, on a heel with a toy, usually off leash in a field, an enclosed field, something you can control. And once the dog loves to stay focused on you, stays really motivated. I want them happy when we're doing a heel. I want them really ignited. Then I start using the stim, the e-collar stim, whenever I turn. I will make U-turns, I'll make V-turns, S-turns. I will move and tap it. Now, again, the dog is excited. The dog already knows what I want, and the dog wants usually the toy or the treats that I have, that I am holding. Then when you're stimming, they go, oh, great, you're about to move. So I move and I stim. Sometimes I'll stim and I'll move away from them and they'll come to me quicker. Or you can tap, 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 and they'll come running even quicker. That's a really fun thing to watch. But again, and this is in the beginning of the whole conversation, we're making the dog love engaging and staying next to us. I hope that makes sense. I forgot who asked that question. Okay, I think I have one more question. If anybody else here has any more questions, let me know. Thoughts on weaning off ecollar? So that's kind of a tricky question. I'm never gonna wean my dog off an ecollar, right? There's plenty of times that I do not have an e-collar on my dog. I have these like pack school outings that I take some of my graduated clients out on, my clients' dogs, and I don't have e-collars on any of those dogs. Those dogs, they love each other, they love being with me. It's all about that. It's all about us being one, engaging with the world. I never need an e-collar for that. But a lot of other times, I like having an e-collar on my dog when I have them off leash. I love it. I don't know what's around. I don't know if there's an aggressive dog out. I've lived in places with bears, with coyotes. Here, there's a lot of coyotes. And I don't want my dog going after things. There's rattlesnakes here. Let's say at the very least, my dog notices a rattlesnake and is pointing at it. Boom. There we go. Rattlesnake training, right? I had the opportunity to teach my dog, don't go messing around with that rattlesnake before the rattlesnake teaches the dog to not mess with it. That's one way. Another thing is I personally really love going on walks with people and talking to people. And I love having my dog next to me off leash. When I go to like big parks, big fields, hiking, and I know I can just tap the e-collar on a very low level and he knows, hey, Bubba, you gotta come back here. You gotta be next to me. You gotta sit. You gotta look up. You gotta make eye contact. So I don't necessarily wean off. I don't think there's ever any need to wean off any tools when it comes to dog training. I think that in reality, tools are just like a cell phone. Like, when do you stop using a cell phone? You don't. I stop using a cell phone with certain people when those certain people are next to me, right? I'm not gonna call them when they're next, right here. So again, I hope that all kind of makes sense. It's a lot of stuff I covered in the past 40 minutes, kind of messy, but I hope it answers a lot of questions, and I will be putting this all up. Well, let me ask this. Anybody here have any other questions? Any e-collar questions you want to ask me before I sign off? All right, I don't think anybody's asking anything. You guys have a lovely Friday and a great weekend. I look forward to answering more questions in the future. Have a good day. Good night. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye. Thank you, little Bean. Little Ellie Bean.